piano. It's time for our ESA talk.
Does he hear you?
I know how to get Bruce to stop playing the piano.
Okay.
Hey, Bruce, we're going to use the fugue as a metaphor for collaborative networks. Come.
The fugue? As metaphor? There's music theory at ESA?
Yes, the fugue's the perfect metaphor for our integration of art and science.
Can you explain a fugue for us?
Absolutely.
Take your jacket off, it's ESA.
In a fugue, first one voice states the subject, the main idea. A second voice restates the subject with a new interpretation.
The subject's the science, and the first voices are papers, our talks,
And the other voices are art, storytelling, creative writing.
and humor.
If microbes grow in H2O water, their DNA becomes labeled with H2O. We can measure that labeling using a centrifuge.
The centrifuge creates a density gradient, and the spinning pushes the labeled DNA further down the tube. We can tell this culture's growing. With the tracer, it got a lot denser. Nice separation like this only happens for a culture. In real communities in nature, the DNA gradient is more like a schmear. In Quantitative Stable Isotope Probing, or qSIP, we sequence all the fractions to measure the density of each species and convert density to growth.
So when I made this image, I'm trying to show the whole series of events, and starting with the forest and a little plug of sample coming out, through all the fractions like dominoes coming towards you, into the sequencer.
It's like the qSIP visual metaphor, the pathway from the forest to the data.
Exactly.
And I use drama to explain qSIP using different color M&Ms and Good and Plenty as bacterial species, and I turn myself into a centrifuge. And spin it, we might end up with something like this. So let's unpack it. First thing you see is that the orange taxa didn't move at all. They're not growing. Neither did the blue taxa. The yellow moved a little bit, so they're growing slowly. But look at these pink. They grew good and plenty.
So in science, we use quantitative graphs like this one, which shows how plant diversity affects carbon storage, which has dollar value in carbon markets. And I love the metaphor you created based on this work, Victor.
Thanks. So the hand symbolizes human activity. It's ripping the diversity out of the landscape. And you see this underlayment of dollar bills that just disintegrate once you do that.
And you chose the dollar bill to show value. And that's where people went all quantitative on this image.
And they're like, so why is it $1? Shouldn't it be more? Should it be $100 bills?
But then we did the math, and it should be less, even less on this spatial scale.
When you see pennies there, it's like, well, that's low value.
And what was super interesting about this is that the artwork provoked the reaction to the science, creating this dialogue.
It's just like a fugue. Sometimes the voices talk to each other.
And our final example is Parched, a collaboration of artists, writers, managers, and scientists. And together we created an art exhibit and documentary about water in the Southwest. Let's look at some of the art. Neil's piece, Flood Lines, shows how the price of water depends on who's buying. The lines on the walls show the water level if you fill the room with $100 in water. At the low price agriculture pays, $100 in water floods the room to the ceiling. But for a household on the Navajo Nation that hauls water, the $100 line is just a few inches above the floor. Experiencing flood lines really makes you feel inequities in water pricing. Klee's work emphasized water conflicts. Let's hear his words.
And so all of the pieces that I created here have some representation of the conflict that we have, not just regarding water, but regarding existence and the challenges that we have for our survival as human people.
So my first work in...
Deborah became fascinated by the algae and their beauty.
And then when I started looking at the images through the microscope, I thought, I really want to see if I can simulate that looking into the microscope. So the bottom tier of paintings are supposed to look like a slide under a microscope.
And I like my artwork being part of the fugue metaphor, and when my artwork is a metaphor, it's like a meta-metaphor.
And my M&Ms make it an M&M meta-metaphor.
I don't think I can out-meta that.